But, I've always, like I said, from that Tuesday in Texas, when I got that answer, I knew all I needed to know about him.
Hulk Hogan built an empire on charisma, manipulation, and lies. The Undertaker shattered the facade, leaking footage and exposing the Golden Goose as a fraud. This is the full, unfiltered account, inside the ring, backstage, and beyond, that proves Hulk Hogan's darkest moment began with one tombstone. The tombstone that exposed Hogan's politics. The relationship between Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker remains one of the most complicated intersections in professional wrestling history. It began with mutual respect, an introduction that gave Mark Calloway his defining gimmick, but quickly dissolved into an atmosphere of distrust, manipulation, and controversy. To understand why The Undertaker would later reveal disturbing truths about Hogan, we need to start at the very beginning, with the creation of the Dead Man character itself. Hogan himself has often claimed that he was central to bringing Mark Calloway to Vince McMahon's attention. As he told it, during the filming of Suburban Commando in 1991, the production needed massive actors to portray alien bounty hunters. Hogan recalled remembering mean Mark Callis from WCW and suggested him for the role. After filming, Hogan allegedly introduced Calloway to McMahon, and in Hogan's words,
"I was doing a movie called Suburban Commando, and we needed a couple of really big aliens. And we had one actor, and we couldn't find another guy big enough, so I remember mean Mark Calloway."
After the movie, Hulk Hogan invited The Undertaker to meet Vince McMahon. According to Hogan,
"We became really good friends. Once we were done, I said, man, you're going to come to New York." So I brought Mark Calloway in to meet Vince. And Vince took a long look at him and looked him up and down. He was a monster, 6'10", in really good shape. And Vince said, "I'm going to call you The Undertaker."
this moment was the birth of The Undertaker, with McMahon seeing Calloway's potential instantly. Undertaker himself rarely contradicted Hogan's version, but insiders argue that Calloway was already on McMahon's radar and had been scouted months earlier. Regardless, Hogan positioned himself as the gatekeeper of Taker's career, an early indication of his tendency to take credit for others' success. The honeymoon phase didn't last. Within a year, Hogan and The Undertaker collided on screen in one of the most infamous incidents in wrestling history, Survivor Series 1991 at Joe Louis Arena in Detroit. This was the night Undertaker won his first WWF championship by defeating Hulk Hogan. But the victory was overshadowed by a supposed neck injury Hogan claimed to have suffered from the Tombstone piledriver. Undertaker recalled the night in detail, describing the lead-up, the paranoia Hogan planted, and the dramatic aftermath. Hours before the show, Hogan pulled him aside to privately express fears about taking the move.
He's telling me, he goes, "Hey, I got this neck injury." He says, "I'm really nervous about taking your finish." And I was like, "Hulk, believe me." I said, "I will protect you. I pride myself on not hurting people. And I promise you, I will have you so tight that there's no way possible that you're going to hurt your neck."
From that point forward, Hogan reminded him constantly, placing the pressure squarely on a young Undertaker about to carry the company's belt for the first time. When the moment came, Undertaker executed the tombstone onto a steel chair. By his own account, Hogan was completely protected.
I've given my kids rougher bumps than I give Hogan.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I wrap him up. I've got him. The chair comes down. Boom. As soon as my knees touch, "Oh, brother, you got me." I'm like, "Oh, shit. I just crippled the Golden Goose."
The supposed injury escalated immediately. Hogan was stretchered backstage, taken into Vince McMahon's office, and surrounded by staff and EMTs. Undertaker, in his own words, was paralyzed with fear that he had ended the career of the company's biggest star. He described hiding behind a wall with Shane McMahon as paramedics asked Hogan if he could feel his limbs. Then Hogan dramatically requested,
I can hear the EMTs, they're checking him out. And then all of a sudden I hear Hogan go, "Somebody get my wife and kids on the phone."
For Undertaker, this was a nightmare scenario. He had just been crowned champion, but instead of celebrating, he thought he had accidentally destroyed the face of professional wrestling. Hogan, however, recovered quickly enough to continue wrestling days later. When Undertaker finally watched the footage back, he saw that Hogan's head had never come close to hitting the mat or chair.
But all the guys are coming up and saying, like, "Man, his head never touched." And I'm like, "No, man, I got him." So we didn't have, I didn't have the same accessibility to monitors and playback back there in 91 as we do now. So it took a few days before I actually got to see the footage. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, Fucking head never touched.
When confronted, Hogan shifted the story, claiming that Undertaker had held him too tight and that this caused a neck strain. For The Undertaker, this was the defining moment where he understood Hogan's true character. Instead of admitting he had exaggerated, Hogan deflected blame to preserve his position as the company's top draw. Undertaker later said this was when he realized everything I needed to know about Hogan. The fallout was swift. Days later, WWF staged an unusual Tuesday pay-per-view, this Tuesday in Texas, where Hogan regained the championship. Undertaker's reign lasted a mere 6 days, one of the shortest in company history, which many observers viewed as a way to quickly restore the belt to Hogan, while maintaining the illusion that Taker had been a legitimate threat. Undertaker himself admitted he believed the entire incident was a setup to justify stripping him of the title. This single event damaged the trust between Hogan and Undertaker permanently. While Undertaker maintained professionalism in public and credited Hogan for his contributions to wrestling, he never forgot the manipulation. For years afterward, Undertaker would be asked about the Survivor Series incident, and he always maintained the same conclusion. Hogan had exaggerated or outright fabricated an injury to regain control of the championship picture. Meanwhile, Hogan continued to spin the story differently depending on the audience. In interviews, he claimed he suffered lasting neck pain from the move, framing it as evidence of his toughness. But wrestlers backstage, reviewing the footage, saw the truth. Undertaker had executed the move safely, and Hogan had used politics to turn a clean title loss into justification for taking the belt back. This was the beginning of the rift. The Undertaker entered WWF as a young, intimidating phenom, but quickly discovered the ruthless politics that surrounded Hogan. The darkest footage of this era is not a hidden camera or unreleased match. It is the footage of the Survivor Series tombstone itself, proving Hogan's head never came close to the mat, exposing the Golden Goose's desperate need to protect his aura at all costs. What Undertaker leaked years later, in podcasts and shoot interviews, was not just a retelling of a match, but the exposure of a calculated deception that undermined his credibility as a performer and nearly derailed his career before it even began. Hogan's paranoia and political maneuvering became clear, and the seeds of animosity between them were planted that night in Detroit. By the end of 1991, The Undertaker had learned a lesson that would define how he carried himself for the next 3 decades. In professional wrestling, skill and safety mattered, but politics and ego often mattered more. And at the top of that pyramid of politics stood Hulk Hogan, the man willing to fake a career-threatening injury to protect his spot. The darkest footage wasn't staged violence or scripted drama. It was the simple reality of watching Hogan pretend to be paralyzed on the locker room floor, while Undertaker, only 26 years old at the time, sat in panic thinking he had ended the Golden Goose's career. The tape didn't lie. Hogan's head never touched, but his credibility was forever damaged in the eyes of The Undertaker and countless peers who quietly noted the truth. This would be only the first of many fractures between Hogan and Undertaker. As the 1990s progressed, more incidents would surface, not only involving Undertaker, but also other wrestlers who experienced the same kind of manipulation, politics, and deception. But Hogan's manipulation at Survivor Series was only the beginning. What The Undertaker soon discovered was that Hogan's tactics weren't aimed just at him. They targeted anyone who threatened the Golden Goose's spot. Undertaker versus Hogan's locker room manipulations. The Survivor Series 1991 controversy was not an isolated incident. For The Undertaker, it was an initiation into a world where Hulk Hogan's politics controlled outcomes as much as in-ring ability. But Undertaker wasn't the only one affected. Over time, more wrestlers encountered Hogan's manipulations, sandbagging, and backroom maneuvering. Undertaker's perspective on Hogan crystallized not only from their own conflict, but from what he observed happening around him in the locker room. One of the most notorious complaints against Hogan involved sandbagging, the practice of going limp during lifts to make a move appear sloppy or to expose an opponent as unsafe. In wrestling, this is considered highly unprofessional and dangerous, as it undermines both the move and the wrestler performing it. Hogan was accused of this tactic on multiple occasions, including in matches against The Undertaker. During Survivor Series 1991 itself, Undertaker attempted a simple chokeslam, but Hogan reportedly went dead weight, making the move look weak. Later, Hogan would claim Undertaker dropped him on his head. Video review, however, showed no such impact, exposing the exaggeration. This was a tactic Hogan allegedly used with others, refused to sell their moves convincingly, then accused them of being unsafe to protect his dominance. Undertaker wasn't alone in being subjected to this behavior. Wrestlers across the WWF and later WCW and TNA described similar experiences. Bret Hart, for instance, publicly stated that Hogan refused to lose cleanly to him in 1993, sabotaging plans for Hart to take the mantle as WWF's new face. Hart was promised a match where Hogan would put him over, wrestling terminology for elevating someone by losing to them. Instead, Hogan maneuvered events so that he dropped the title to Yokozuna instead, claiming Hart wasn't on his level. The Undertaker witnessed this same pattern, Hogan using his creative control to block younger stars from surpassing him. The WrestleMania 9 debacle in 1993 is perhaps the clearest example of Hogan's backstage politics. After Bret Hart lost the WWF Championship to Yokozuna, Hogan inserted himself into the storyline, emerging immediately after the match to challenge Yokozuna. In a matter of seconds, Hogan pinned him and walked away with the championship, effectively erasing Hart's momentum in favor of his own nostalgia-driven push. Hart later said Hogan refused to honor the agreement to drop the belt back to him, proving that his political power was more important than advancing the company's future. For The Undertaker, these events reinforced what he had already discovered. Hogan's reputation as the Golden Goose was maintained not just by his drawing power, but by manipulation behind the scenes. Undertaker had been the victim of Hogan's exaggerated injury story. Hart was denied his rightful coronation, and countless others found their careers stalled because Hogan viewed them as threats. Even in WCW, Hogan carried these tactics with him. After jumping to the company in 1994, he quickly gained creative control, ensuring that storylines favored him and the New World Order, NWO. Wrestlers like Sting, Lex Luger, and Goldberg were all subject to outcomes shaped by Hogan's demands. The Undertaker, still in WWF at the time, watched from afar as Hogan's politics poisoned another locker room. The difference was that by then, Undertaker had solidified his position as the conscience of the locker room in WWF, providing a counterbalance to political gamesmanship. Undertaker's role as locker room leader was defined by fairness, respect, and loyalty. While Hogan used paranoia to maintain his top spot, Undertaker built his influence by ensuring wrestlers were protected in the ring and that disputes were settled honorably. In interviews, Undertaker recalled that the Hogan incident taught him the importance of being a safe worker and earning the trust of peers, something Hogan had failed to uphold. The contrast became sharper as years passed. In Undertaker's eyes, Hogan represented the old guard, self-preservation at all costs, even if it meant sabotaging colleagues. Undertaker embodied the new guard, professionalism, discipline, and respect for the business above ego. This philosophical divide defined their uneasy coexistence whenever Hogan returned to WWE in the decades that followed. When Hogan rejoined WWE in later years, Undertaker treated him with respect but kept distance. In Undertaker's own words, this illustrates the Undertaker's pragmatism. He knew Hogan was pivotal to wrestling's mainstream success in the 1980s, but he also knew firsthand how Hogan's politics harmed others. Respect for contributions did not erase the memory of manipulation. The Undertaker's interactions with other wrestlers also reinforced Hogan's pattern. Koko B. Ware, for instance, confronted Undertaker after taking the very first tombstone in 1990, accusing him of hurting his neck. Undertaker apologized repeatedly and later admitted that after watching the tape, Koko was justified in his anger. Unlike Hogan, Koko's injury scare was real, and Undertaker acknowledged it honestly. The difference was stark. When Undertaker made a mistake, he admitted fault. When Hogan was proven wrong, he doubled down on lies. Over the years, Undertaker became increasingly vocal about Hogan's role as a manipulator. He described how the 1991 injury claim was a setup, how Hogan constantly reminded him about his bad neck throughout the day, and how the aftermath, Hogan reclaiming the title at Tuesday in Texas, was orchestrated political theater. Wrestlers who lived through the era quietly agreed. Hogan had leveraged paranoia and favoritism to maintain control, regardless of the truth. The Undertaker's revelations about Hogan's politics resonated because they matched the broader experiences of other wrestlers. Bret Hart, Randy Savage, and even Shawn Michaels at times pointed to Hogan's self-serving actions. Undertaker's testimony carried additional weight because he was seen as an honest broker, a man who built his career on respect, not deception. By the time the Attitude Era took over and Hogan's presence faded, Undertaker's philosophy dominated the locker room. Wrestlers like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Triple H thrived under an environment where respect and professionalism were prioritized. Undertaker had become the standard bearer, the opposite of the Hogan model. Still, Hogan's influence lingered. Whenever he returned, tension followed. Some younger wrestlers distrusted him outright, while others tried to balance acknowledging his legacy with avoiding his manipulations. Undertaker, having lived through the darkest footage and the darkest truths, embodied that balance: outward respect, inward skepticism. The Undertaker's accounts of Hogan's exaggerations and manipulations spread widely in podcasts and interviews, transforming private locker room whispers into public knowledge. For fans, this footage, Undertaker's calm, detailed descriptions of Hogan's deception, became the true leak. No secret tapes were necessary. The evidence was already there, captured on video, replayed frame by frame, proving Hogan's head never touched the mat. The Undertaker's revelations about Hogan extended beyond personal grievance. They represented a cautionary tale about ego, politics, and the darker side of wrestling's golden age. His willingness to expose the truth, years after the fact, ensured that fans and wrestlers alike would never see Hogan's legend in the same way again. But Hogan's manipulation inside the ring was only part of his story. Outside the ring, his scandals, involving sex tapes, racist rants, and lawsuits, would eventually overshadow his accomplishments. While Undertaker's revelations focused on the professional betrayal, the next chapter of Hogan's story revealed something darker still: how personal scandals destroyed his public image and permanently stained his legacy. Hogan's in-ring politics painted him as a master manipulator, but what happened outside the ring was far worse. The scandals that erupted in his personal life would eclipse even the darkest stories from the locker room. Hogan's scandals and the fall of Hulkamania. If The Undertaker's revelations exposed Hulk Hogan's in-ring manipulations, the scandals that followed outside the ring revealed something even darker. A public persona built on heroism and family values that collapsed under the weight of racism, deceit, and humiliation. The Undertaker's leaked accounts painted Hogan as a political schemer backstage. But by the mid-2000s, Hogan's own actions destroyed his image far more brutally than any wrestler could. The first and most explosive scandal emerged in 2012, when Gawker Media published an excerpt from a secretly recorded sex tape involving Hogan and Heather Clem, the then wife of radio host Bubba the Love Sponge. Hogan claimed he was unaware of the recording, describing it as a violation of privacy. Gawker defended its publication as newsworthy, given Hogan's celebrity status and his history of openly discussing his sex life. The video sparked a privacy lawsuit that would spiral into one of the most consequential legal battles in modern media history. At first, the scandal was treated primarily as a case of celebrity embarrassment. Hogan himself admitted to the affair on The Howard Stern Show, but emphasized he believed it was a one-time lapse during a low point in his life. Yet the tape contained more than explicit footage. Years later, in 2015, transcripts leaked that revealed Hogan making openly racist remarks during Pillow Talk. The racist rant centered on Hogan's daughter Brooke, her music career, and rumors of her dating a black man. Hogan, in the leaked audio, used racial slurs repeatedly, at one point declaring, "I am a racist to a point." The fallout was immediate and devastating. On July 24, 2015, WWE terminated Hogan's contract, erased him from their Hall of Fame listings, pulled him from merchandise, and effectively erased him from company history. Retail giants like Walmart and Target followed suit, pulling Hogan-branded products from shelves. The backlash extended to the locker room. Wrestlers like Titus O'Neil, The New Day, and JTG condemned Hogan's remarks, questioning whether he deserved forgiveness. While some peers, including The Rock and Booker T, initially defended him, many black wrestlers expressed disappointment. The Undertaker, true to his philosophy, avoided public comment. But insiders noted that Hogan's scandal only confirmed what Undertaker had long suspected, that behind the colorful bandana and booming catchphrases lay a darker truth. Hogan attempted damage control through multiple apologies. In an interview with People magazine, he admitted the language was unacceptable and asked for forgiveness. On Good Morning America, he pleaded, "Please forgive me, people get better every day." But critics pointed out that Hogan often focused more on being recorded without his consent than on the harm of his words. The scandal intersected with his ongoing lawsuit against Gawker. Financed secretly by billionaire Peter Thiel, who had his own grudge against the outlet, Hogan's case went to trial in 2016. The jury awarded him $115 million in compensatory damages and $25 million in punitive damages, bankrupting Gawker Media. Hogan later settled for $31 million. The case remains a landmark example of how privacy, free speech, and billionaire influence collided in the digital age. Even as Hogan celebrated victory over Gawker, the racist rant continued to haunt him. Though reinstated into WWE's Hall of Fame in 2018, fan reactions were divided. Every appearance Hogan made was met with a mix of cheers and boos. The man once worshipped by children as the embodiment of Hulkamania now symbolized the contradictions of wrestling's past: beloved icon, proven manipulator, and disgraced figure. The scandals compounded when other patterns of dishonesty resurfaced. Hogan was infamous for fabricating stories to enhance his legend, claiming he wrestled 400 days in 1 year due to time zone shifts, insisting he auditioned to play bass for Metallica, or exaggerating Andre the Giant's weight and frailty before their WrestleMania 3 match. Wrestlers and fans dubbed these falsehoods Hoganisms, shorthand for tall tales that exposed his need to remain larger than life even at the cost of credibility. Who prided himself on authenticity and respect, Hogan's behavior was the antithesis of what wrestling should represent. Undertaker's leaked recollections of the Survivor Series match proved Hogan could not be trusted in the ring. Hogan's public scandals proved he could not be trusted outside of it either. Hogan's final years added a morbid twist. On July 24, 2025, exactly 10 years to the day after the racist rant leaked, Hulk Hogan died at his home in Clearwater, Florida, from a heart attack at age 71. The date of his death was viewed by many as eerie, even poetic. Hogan's death revealed additional complications. Medical records showed he had undergone neck fusion surgery in May 2025, leading to nerve damage and hospitalization. His family is reportedly pursuing a malpractice lawsuit, adding yet another layer of controversy to his legacy. The funeral drew wrestling legends like Vince McMahon, Triple H, and Ric Flair, but fan reactions remained divided. For some, Hogan was still the hero of their childhood. For others, his death was a reminder of unhealed wounds caused by racism and manipulation. The Undertaker, who had spent decades revealing the darker truths about Hogan's career, stood as the ultimate contrast. A man who protected the integrity of wrestling even when Hogan sought to distort it. In the end, the darkest footage wasn't a hidden video or backstage leak. It was the undeniable record of Hulk Hogan's actions, exaggerating injuries, sabotaging peers, using racial slurs, lying to fans, and prioritizing ego above all else. The Undertaker's testimony simply confirmed what the evidence had already shown. Hulk Hogan's greatest opponent was never Andre the Giant, The Rock, or even The Undertaker. It was the truth itself. And in that battle, Hulk Hogan lost. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.